There is a truth that has followed you like a faint shadow, a truth you have never dared colocar in voz alta, and yet it presses against your chest every night when the world finally quiets down. It is the feeling that the sky has been sealed for a long time, as if every tear you ever offered rose to a height where no answer lived. And still, you kept whispering within yourself, hoping that someone somewhere would hear the soft collapse of your heart. Many people around you believe that the silence you face means indifference, but deep inside, you know it is something else, something older, heavier, something that has been shaping your life without asking permission. When you were younger, you thought that pain always brought clarity, that every cry would eventually open a door. But instead, you learned that suffering can build rooms inside the soul where no one enters, rooms where your voice echoes back with a softness that frightens you. You carry memories like small glowing stones, things you never told anyone, things that still burn. That night when you cried alone in the kitchen because you realized no one would ask how your day had been. That morning when you woke up feeling older than your body, wondering when exactly your life had shifted from being seen to being overlooked. You walked through those moments with a kind of quiet dignity, but the silence that responded to your pain was so dense that it felt almost alive. There is a particular kind of hurt that comes when you realize that your tears are fluent in a language no one else seems to understand. It is not the kind of suffering that screams, but the one that sinks, breathes, waits, the one that transforms you without warning. Sometimes your tears fall not because of a single event, but because of a long accumulation of things unsaid, things you carried for years, thinking they were light. You became good at hiding what trembles inside you. You became good at holding yourself together in front of others. And the world rewards that performance of strength, while your softness goes unnoticed. There were evenings when you sat in your living room and felt something inside you collapsing quietly. You told yourself it was exhaustion, or age, or routine, but deep down, you knew it was the slow fading of hope that someone would finally listen without asking you to be stronger. And this truth, the one nobody ever told you, is that there are tears meant to be seen and tears meant to be carried alone. The second kind is the one that shapes your destiny. Maybe you never said it out loud, but there were days when you felt that even the sky had turned its back, when you prayed without praying, when you wished without words, when you begged for a sign without knowing if signs still existed. You looked at the ceiling in the dark and felt like you were talking to a wall made of air. You wondered if you were being punished or forgotten, or if the universe simply had no space left for you, and yet something kept you alive, some strange resilience that did not come from hope, but from the instinct to continue breathing even when nothing changed. That instinct is the quiet power that lives in you, the one you rarely recognize because it does not make noise. You might think your tears have been wasted, but they have shaped the way you see the world. They taught you to look deeper than most people, to notice the things that others pass by. You read silence the way others read maps. You sense sadness in a room before anyone speaks. You understand loss before it announces itself. These abilities were carved into you by the very moments that almost broke you. And although the world may never acknowledge this, there is a kind of wisdom in you that cannot be learned through books or advice. It was learned through nights that lasted too long, through mornings when you forced yourself out of bed because giving up felt too heavy even for your exhaustion. There is a strange comfort that comes from realizing you are not the only one who lives in this quiet territory of unanswered cries. So many people walk beside you invisibly, carrying their own hidden storms, pretending to be fine. Some smile with a practiced grace, others avoid mirrors because mirrors tell the truth too quickly. And among them, you move, feeling more connected to strangers than to those who know your name. It is not loneliness exactly. It is a state of being unspoken, and it makes your heart both fragile and powerful at the same time. Perhaps no one ever told you this, but your tears contain a form of memory. Every time you cried in silence, a piece of you tried to preserve something that mattered. Maybe it was the version of yourself that once dreamed without fear. Maybe it was the child you were long ago. Maybe it was the part of you that still believes in tenderness. Your tears never meant failure. They meant that something inside you was still alive enough to feel. And that is where your strength begins, in the willingness to feel even when nothing responds. It started quietly, almost politely, the way certain endings begin long before we recognize them. At first, it was only a small pause in the air of your home. The kind of pause you imagine is temporary. You told yourself you were just tired, that life was simply demanding more of you that week. But then the pause became a presence, and the presence became a silence that curled around the rooms like something alive. You did not notice its arrival because silence rarely knocks. It settles. It takes shape in places you once filled with your voice, and before you understand what changed, it is already inside your daily life, arranging itself around your habits with a patience that is almost cruel. You might remember the first time you felt it clearly. Maybe it was a morning when you walked through your own house and the sound of your footsteps felt too loud. Or maybe it was an evening when you sat at the table and realized no one had asked about your day in so long that you had forgotten what it felt like to be expected. There is a strange ache that comes when the walls around you feel more familiar than the people who once shared your life. You begin to sense that something is missing, something that used to feel natural, a simple question, a voice calling your name, a presence that confirmed your existence. Instead, you are left with the soft hum of appliances and the whisper of your own breathing. It happens gradually, the way the tide withdraws without announcing its retreat. You wake up one day and realize the house is too tidy, too still, too preserved, as if waiting for a life that left quietly. The silence sits at the edge of your bed in the mornings, and you feel a weight that has nothing to do with your body. You try turning on the television, the radio, music you once loved, but the noise only emphasizes the absence. It is like placing a candle in a deserted room. The flame flickers, brave and bright, but it only reveals how empty the room really is. There is something unsettling about repetition when you do not feel seen. You prepare your morning coffee the same way every day. You fold the same clothes. You walk past the same mirror, yet each day it feels as if a layer of your presence is fading. You look at yourself and notice small changes you never intended to make. A new line around your eyes, a softness in your movements, a certain resignation in your posture. These are the kinds of changes that happen when silence becomes a companion rather than a visitor. Some people do not understand how heavy quietness can be. They think silence is peaceful, that it means rest. But you know there is a kind of silence that drains you slowly. A silence that pulls at the edges of your identity until you start questioning whether you still matter. It is the silence that follows conversations that never happened. The silence that settles after dreams postponed for so long that they begin to dissolve. The silence that lives in rooms where laughter once existed. This silence does not soothe, it erases. And it is not only the house that grows quiet. You do too. You stop sharing small things because no one asks. You stop expecting messages. You stop waiting for invitations. You become someone who moves in the world without announcing your presence, as if trying not to disturb anyone. It is not loneliness exactly. It is more like becoming transparent, while still carrying the full weight of yourself. You walk through grocery stores and streets and offices with a careful grace, as if you know the world has forgotten to make space for you. The saddest part is that this transformation happens while you are still alive, still breathing, still hoping that someone notices. It is strange how silence can change the way you see time. Hours begin to stretch into long corridors. Days become similar enough that you stop counting them. You find yourself lingering in old memories because they feel louder than the present. A single photograph can echo more strongly than a room full of real objects. You start to understand why people cling to the past, not because the past was perfect, but because it spoke to you. It recognized you. It held your name. And the present sometimes feels like a vast blank page that no one bothers to write on. Yet, within this quiet, something else happens. You begin to hear parts of yourself you ignored for years, regrets you pushed aside, thoughts you buried under responsibilities, feelings you dismissed because they seemed inconvenient. Silence may be painful, but it is also revealing. It makes you aware of the subtle tremors in your soul, the ones you never allowed yourself to feel when life was louder. It forces you to meet yourself without distractions. And that meeting, though uncomfortable, is the beginning of a deeper understanding. If this spoke to something inside you, tell me in the comments when you first felt the quietness grow heavier in your life. And subscribe if you wish to keep walking with a voice that understands the corners of your heart that the world usually overlooks. Simone Weil once said that suffering is a form of attention, and perhaps you have felt this without ever knowing her name. There are moments in life when pain forces you to look directly at what you spent years trying to avoid. It is not the loud pain that demands witnesses. It is the quiet one, the one that sits inside your chest like a small, trembling animal, waiting for you to acknowledge it. When you finally look at it, without trying to fix it or hide it, the world seems to shift. Colors appear different. Time slows. Memories surface with a clarity that can feel almost too sharp. This is the strange consciousness of suffering that Simone Weil understood so deeply. The idea that pain can strip away everything unnecessary until only truth remains. She believed that real suffering is not meant to glorify us, but to empty us. And perhaps you have felt this in your own life. That sensation of being slowly hollowed out from the inside, as if life were quietly removing the walls you built to protect yourself. You may remember a moment when grief hit you so unexpectedly that for a second you forgot your own name, or a night when you lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling a pressure in your chest that no doctor could diagnose. These are not mere emotional reactions. They are thresholds. They mark the places where your soul encounters its own depth. Most people fear this depth because it feels like being pulled underwater. We spend years distracting ourselves, filling our days with noise, movement, tasks that make us feel in control. But suffering interrupts all of that. It takes away the illusions we defend so fiercely. It forces us to meet ourselves as we truly are, without the polished stories we tell others. Simone Weil used to sit in silence for hours because she believed that pain, when not resisted, becomes a teacher. It shows you what you have been hiding. It shows you where your heart still bleeds, even when your face remains calm. And it shows you the parts of your soul that have been waiting patiently to be acknowledged. There is a particular kind of awareness that comes from suffering consciously. Think of the times when you felt deeply hurt, but did not try to escape the feeling. Perhaps it was after a betrayal. Perhaps it was after losing someone who once made the world feel safe. In those moments, you were not pretending. You were not performing strength for the sake of others. You were simply present with your own truth. You might have cried quietly. You might have sat in stillness for hours. Or you might have walked slowly through your home, touching objects that suddenly felt filled with memory. This is what conscious suffering feels like. It is not dramatic, it is intimate. When you allow yourself to feel pain without turning away, something unexpected happens. You begin to see meaning where before there was only confusion. You notice patterns in your life that were invisible years ago. You realize how often you betrayed your own needs to keep the peace. You recognize how much of your suffering came not from others, but from your refusal to speak up when your soul whispered for help. This awareness hurts, but it is also liberating. It is the kind of realization that changes the way you breathe. Simone Weil believed that suffering opens the door to a deeper perception of reality, not because pain is holy, but because nothing reveals the truth more clearly than the moments when you can no longer pretend. Maybe you have noticed this too. Maybe you have felt that the older you become, the more transparent life feels. The lies you once told yourself no longer work. The excuses you used to make no longer comfort you. Pain has a way of sharpening your vision, like adjusting a lens you did not realize was blurred. You start recognizing the small moments of tenderness that once passed unnoticed. A warm beam of morning light, the way your own hands rest gently on your lap, the sudden memory of laughter in a room that has been silent for too long. These are the gifts that come from paying attention to your suffering instead of burying it. Simone Weil believed that the soul becomes more human when it allows itself to break. She wrote about affliction with a clarity that surprises anyone who reads her for the first time. Her life was full of physical pain, emotional wounds, and choices that most people would never consider. And yet she did not treat suffering as a punishment. She treated it as a kind of doorway, a passage into a truer version of oneself. This does not mean seeking pain. It means recognizing its presence and letting it speak. It means listening to the parts of you that you silence during busy days. It means giving space to emotions you once called weakness. And perhaps the most curious thing is that when you allow suffering to be conscious, it becomes less frightening. You stop running from yourself. You stop fearing the nights when everything feels too heavy. You begin to see that pain is not trying to destroy you. It is trying to reveal you. It is trying to return you to the person you were before life asked you to harden your heart. If this resonates with something deep inside you, share in the comments a moment when your pain taught you something you did not want to learn. And subscribe if you want to keep exploring truths that most people are too afraid to say out loud. There is a moment in life when you look at yourself in the mirror and realize that your body has been quietly carrying time without your permission. It happens slowly, almost imperceptibly, until one morning you touch your own face and feel a softness where once there was firmness, a tenderness where once there was certainty. You notice the way your hands reveal stories you never intended to tell, the way your posture betrays the years you tried so hard to ignore. And yet, inside you, there is a voice that has not aged at all. A voice that still feels 19 or 20 or forever suspended in the age when your soul first learned to dream. This contradiction is one of the most painful gifts of growing older. The feeling of being split between a body that moves differently and an inner life that still burns with the same intensity. You might remember a moment when you bent down to tie your shoes and felt a stiffness that startled you, or a time when you saw a photo of yourself and wondered how the world had changed your face without asking. These realizations are small but piercing. They make you pause in the middle of ordinary tasks, as if time itself were reminding you that nothing remains untouched. But what often hurts the most is not the aging of the body. It is the quiet truth that the world begins to treat you as if your inner fire no longer exists. People assume that because your skin carries the marks of the years, your soul must have dimmed as well. They forget that inside every older body lives a younger self still waiting to be seen. You carry memories that the younger generation would not understand, not because they lack intelligence, but because they have not yet felt the weight of decades resting on their shoulders. You remember moments that shaped you, joys that once illuminated you, loves that left permanent imprints on your heart. You remember what it felt like to be chosen, to be wanted, to be vibrant enough that your presence filled a room. These memories are not nostalgic escapes. They are living echoes inside you. They remind you that no matter how much time has passed, your soul is still awake, still hungry, still alive with longing. There is a quiet tragedy in realizing that the world often stops looking at you just when your inner life becomes richer than ever. People see the wrinkles but not the wisdom, the slowed steps but not the strength it took to keep walking. They see the physical changes but not the emotional landscapes you have traveled. And sometimes, when you feel invisible, you wonder if your younger self is trapped inside you like a bird behind glass, fluttering its wings without anyone noticing. This is not vanity. This is the human desire to be recognized in the fullness of who you are, body and soul, woven together. Think of how many times you have walked into a room and felt that the world no longer turns toward you the way it once did. Or how many times you have spoken and felt your words dissolve before reaching the listener. Aging can bring a sense of disappearance, not because you vanish, but because people look without truly seeing. Yet inside, your emotions remain vivid. You still feel the sting of disappointment, the warmth of affection, the yearning for connection. These feelings do not weaken with age. If anything, they deepen. There is a strange intimacy in watching your body change. It teaches you things you never understood before. It teaches you humility because you begin to accept that control is an illusion. It teaches you compassion because you understand in your bones what it means to be human and fragile and temporary. And it teaches you tenderness because you realize how much care you owe yourself after all these years of enduring. You begin to touch your own hands with softer attention. You begin to breathe more slowly when your heart aches. You learn to hold yourself the way you once wished someone else would hold you. What many people never realize is that the soul does not age in the same rhythm as the body. The soul continues to hunger for beauty, continues to long for meaning, continues to ache for connection. There are days when you feel a surge of energy that surprises you, a quiet excitement for something small and ordinary that makes your inner life glow, a sunrise that paints your room with gold, a song you once loved that still knows how to reach your heart, a scent in the air that pulls you back to a moment you thought you had forgotten. These experiences remind you that the core of who you are remains untouched by time. There is also a kind of secret pride that comes from knowing that you have survived things that once threatened to shatter you. You have endured heartbreaks that would have crushed a younger version of yourself. You have carried responsibilities that others could not imagine. You have stood in the middle of storms and continued to walk even when the ground felt unstable beneath you. This resilience does not erase the longing inside you, but it shapes you into someone who feels deeply and still dares to love the world despite everything. If you felt your own truth reflected in these words, share in the comments how aging has changed the way you see yourself and subscribe if you wish to keep finding a voice that honors the timeless part of you that still burns quietly beneath the surface. There is an error many people carry their entire lives without ever naming it, a quiet misunderstanding that grows inside the heart until it becomes a weight. It is the belief that someone someday would notice your exhaustion without you having to say a word, that someone would look into your eyes and recognize the silent storms you were trying so hard to hide. You lived much of your life with the hope that your strength would not be mistaken for the absence of need, that your patience would be seen as tenderness rather than resignation. And yet the world rarely gives back what you give. You learned this truth slowly, almost painfully, as the years unfolded. You might remember moments when you stayed awake late into the night, waiting for a message that never came, a question no one asked, a gesture that would finally prove you were not carrying everything alone. Perhaps you told yourself that people were busy, that they cared but did not know how to show it, and maybe that was true. But even so, the disappointment settled inside you like dust in a forgotten room. You kept hoping that someone would sense your breaking point by instinct, as if real love or real friendship came with an inner compass that always pointed toward your pain. This longing was not foolish, it was human. Every soul wants to be felt without needing to make noise. Yet somewhere along the way, you began to realize that waiting for others to rescue you was slowly drowning you. You had spent so many years being the dependable one, the one who listens, the one who supports, the one who stays steady even in chaos. You became so good at being strong that people forgot you had soft places too. You trained yourself to hide your vulnerability because vulnerability had never been rewarded in your life. And so you took the heavy path without protest, believing that one day someone would finally see how much you were carrying. But that day did not arrive in the way you expected. There is a quiet ache that grows when you live for too long without being asked what you need, not because others do not care, but because you taught them you were fine on your own. You learned to smile when your heart hurt. You learned to say it is all right when nothing was. And with time, the world believed you. Even the people closest to you began to see only the version of yourself that you performed. The truth beneath your strength remained invisible. It is not that they did not love you. It is that you hid the rawest parts of yourself so carefully that no one ever knew where to look. Think of how many times you silenced your own needs for the sake of peace. How many times you said yes when every part of you whispered no. How many times you placed your own desires at the bottom of the list because tending to others felt easier than tending to yourself. You may not even hear your own voice clearly anymore because it has been softened by years of trying not to inconvenience anyone. And this is the hidden error. The world cannot hear a voice you do not speak. People cannot recognize pain you do not show. They cannot rescue you if you keep pretending you do not need to be saved. There is a strange tenderness in realizing this. It feels like standing in the middle of an empty road, finally understanding that the person you kept waiting for was never meant to arrive. Not because you are unworthy of love, but because your healing cannot be outsourced. You were waiting for someone to decipher you the way a musician deciphers a melody, instinctively, effortlessly. But people are not melodies, and even if they were, they would still need you to hum the first note. You might think this realization would bring bitterness, but it often brings clarity instead. You begin to see how many times your heart whispered for help while your mouth said nothing. You remember how often you softened your truth to avoid upsetting others. You begin to understand that your silence was not protection. It was a slow erosion of your own needs. And without noticing it, you built a life where everyone believed you were fine because that was the version you showed them. There is a moment in every life when the soul finally admits to itself that it is tired of being quiet, tired of being the one who always adjusts, tired of being strong in all the wrong ways. And in that moment, something inside you shifts. It is subtle, almost imperceptible, but it changes everything. You begin to see that asking for help does not make you a burden. Expressing your needs does not make you needy. Admitting your pain does not make you weak. It makes you real. And being real is the first step toward being understood. When you stop waiting for someone to read your mind and instead begin to honor your own truth, you feel something inside you rise. Something that had been asleep for years, your voice, your boundaries, your desires. They begin to surface slowly, as if testing whether the world is safe enough to hear them. And the most surprising part is that once you begin to speak from a place of honesty, the right people will finally listen. Not because they suddenly became more attentive, but because you finally stopped hiding. If these words touched a place inside you that rarely receives attention, share in the comments something you have carried quietly for too long, and subscribe if you want to keep finding a voice that speaks to the parts of you that the world often overlooks. There is a particular kind of silence that feels heavier than loneliness. A silence that arrives not from the absence of people, but from the absence of answers. It is the silence you encounter when you look upward or inward, or anywhere you once found comfort, and suddenly nothing responds. This silence does not shout, it does not punish, it simply stays. And because it stays, it begins to take shape inside you, filling the spaces where certainty used to live. You start to wonder if the universe has turned its face away from you, or if perhaps you have done something wrong without knowing. You begin to walk through your days with a quiet ache, a feeling that your prayers or your hopes or your desperate wishes are dissolving before they reach wherever they were meant to go. Simone Weil believed that this silence is not rejection, but a kind of attention turned inward. She wrote that the absence of response is not the absence of presence, but the removal of distractions, an invitation to face the truth without any comforting illusions. It is a difficult idea to accept. Most of us grew up believing that comfort is a sign we are being guided, that warmth means we are not alone, that clarity is proof that we are on the right path. But there are moments in life when everything goes quiet, and in that quiet, we are stripped of all the things that used to make the world feel manageable. You may have lived one of those moments without fully naming it, a night when you sat on the edge of your bed, holding your own hands because there was no one else to hold them. Or a morning when you whispered a question into the air, hoping that fate or love or some unseen force would answer, only to be met with silence so deep it felt like the world had paused. There is a sharpness in that silence, a clarity that makes you confront the parts of yourself you have avoided. And although it hurts, it also reveals something you might never have discovered otherwise. Silence from above or beyond or within often mirrors the silence we keep with ourselves. How many years have you spent ignoring your own truth, burying your needs, pushing away your fears because they felt inconvenient or too heavy to face? The silence you feel from the universe sometimes reflects the silence you maintain toward your own heart. This is not a punishment, it is a calling, a quiet insistence that you turn inward instead of outward, that you listen to what has been waiting inside you for far too long. There is a story many people carry, but rarely say out loud. It is the story of crying alone in a room and feeling as though your tears evaporate into nothing, not seen, not heard, not held. In those moments, you might believe that even the sky is closed to you. But what if the silence you feel is not a door shutting, but a space opening? A space where you can finally hear your own voice without the noise of the world. A space where you can meet your pain without pretending you are stronger than you truly feel. A space where you can slow down long enough to recognize the longing inside you that you have buried under decades of responsibility. Simone Weil said that the soul is shaped by attention, and sometimes the silence you encounter is life redirecting your attention from what you want to what you need. You may want reassurance, but what you need is truth. You may want immediate answers, but what you need is to understand the questions you are really asking. You may want to be rescued, but what you need is to meet the parts of yourself that have been waiting to be acknowledged. This is the painful wisdom hidden inside the silence. It changes you, not by providing clarity, but by removing everything that distracts you from yourself. There is something almost sacred about the moments when nothing answers you. They reveal your deepest fears, but they also reveal your deepest desires. They show you what matters. They show you what hurts. They show you what you have been carrying as if you had no other choice. Imagine how many years you have walked with burdens that were never meant to be permanent. Imagine how long you have remained strong because you believed no one else would understand your breaking point. In the silence, these truths surface. They rise with a quiet intensity that demands your attention. And yet, for all its heaviness, silence can also be a turning point. It pushes you to look within, not because the world has abandoned you, but because there is a hidden wisdom inside you that cannot be reached through noise. You begin to see that the absence of response does not always mean abandonment. Sometimes it means you are being invited to grow in ways comfort would never allow. It means that you are being prepared, reshaped, stripped of illusions so that something true can finally emerge. It means that your soul is being refined by the very space that feels empty. If something in these words speaks to the silence you have carried inside you, share in the comments how this quiet has shaped your life. And subscribe if you want to continue exploring the parts of yourself that only reveal their truth when the world grows still. There comes a moment in every life when a truth you have avoided for decades finally stands in front of you, quiet but undeniable. It is the realization that no one is coming to translate your pain for you. No one is coming to step into your story and explain your heart to the world. For years you may have believed that if you suffered silently, someone would eventually sense it. That if you held everything together long enough, someone would recognize the effort behind your calmness. But life has a way of revealing its hardest lessons slowly, as if waiting for you to be strong enough to hear them. And this is one of the hardest. Your tears do not send signals unless you allow them to be seen. Your pain does not become visible unless you speak it. And your inner world remains a hidden country unless you open the door yourself. This truth can feel harsh when you first face it. It can feel like an accusation, as if the world failed you, and in many ways it did. There were days when you needed to be asked if you were all right, yet no one asked. There were moments when you needed someone to notice your shaking hands, your distant eyes, your quiet voice. But people often see only what they have learned to look for, and many have never learned to recognize the signs of a soul carrying too much. So you became the kind of person who swallows their own hurt, who tightens their jaw and softens their voice, who pretends everything is fine so that no one worries. You became fluent in invisibility. But the truth that frightens yet frees is this: you are the only one who can reveal the depth of your suffering. You are the only one who can name what hurts. You are the only one who can place your truth on the table and say, "This is mine. This is what happened. This is what shaped me." And even though the world should have done better, even though the people around you should have paid more attention, no one else can enter your inner world unless you allow them. This does not mean shouting. It does not mean begging for understanding. It means finally giving yourself permission to exist without filtering or shrinking. Think of how many years you have lived with the expectation that someone would read you intuitively. A partner, a parent, a friend, a child. You hoped that love would naturally understand you without explanation. But love is not mind reading. Love is not instinct alone. Love needs truth, spoken in human words. You may remember a time when you hinted at your pain in subtle ways, hoping someone would pick up the pieces of meaning. But hints rarely heal. Half-truths rarely liberate. You were waiting for someone to look deeper, but they were waiting for you to open up. And in the space between those two hopes, silence grew. There is a story that unfolds quietly in many lives. A person spends decades giving, supporting, listening, holding space for others. They become the strong one, the reliable one, the steady one. But inside they are collapsing in slow motion, unseen and unheard, because they never allow their vulnerability to surface. They believe that asking for help makes them weak. They believe that expressing their needs is selfish. And so they build a life where everyone depends on them, but they depend on no one. And then one day, they wake up and realize they have built a world where they feel utterly alone. This realization can feel like heartbreak, but it is also a doorway. Because once you see that you have waited too long for someone else to understand you, you also see that you have the power to change everything. You begin to understand that liberation does not always come in the form of rescue. Sometimes it comes in the form of honesty. A quiet honesty that begins inside your own bones. The honesty that whispers, "I cannot keep pretending." The honesty that says, "My heart deserves to be felt." The honesty that asks, "What would happen if I finally told the truth?" And the surprising thing is that once you begin to speak even a little, once you allow your truth to rise to the surface instead of burying it under polite silence, the world responds differently. People cannot feel what you hide. They cannot comfort what you disguise. They cannot meet you in your depth if you stay at the surface. But when you finally choose to let yourself be seen, truly seen, something shifts in the air around you. Not everyone will understand, but those who can will draw closer. And you will no longer feel like a stranger inside your own life. Your pain has waited years for your permission to be acknowledged. It has lived behind your quiet smiles and your careful strengths, It has followed you into rooms where you pretended to be fine, and yet it has never left you. It has only waited, not for someone else to hear it, but for you to give it a voice. This is the truth that frightens, but frees. Your healing begins the moment you stop hiding from yourself. If these words stirred something in you, write in the comments a truth you have kept silent for too long, and subscribe if you want to continue walking through the kind of honesty that helps the soul finally breathe. There is a moment in every life when something shifts quietly inside you, a moment so small on the outside that no one else would ever notice. It does not arrive with grand revelations or sudden clarity. It comes in a breath, in a pause, in the soft realization that you cannot continue living the way you have been living. You may not even recognize it at first. It can feel like a slight trembling under your ribs or a sudden tenderness toward your own pain. But it is there, a gentle insistence rising from a place inside you that you have ignored for far too long. It is the moment when your soul decides it can no longer bear the weight of silence and begins to reach for itself again. This turning point does not look dramatic. It can happen while washing dishes, or sitting in a car parked outside your own home, or standing in the shower with your head tilted forward as the water carries away a tiredness you have held for years. It might happen when you see your reflection and feel a sudden ache for the person staring back at you, or when someone asks how you are and you almost tell the truth before stopping yourself. In that, almost is a spark. That spark is the beginning of change. People often imagine transformation as something loud, a big decision, a bold action, a dramatic exit from an old life. But the real transformation begins much earlier, in a moment of quiet honesty. In the instant you whisper to yourself, "I cannot keep doing this," that whisper is not weakness, it is awakening. It is the first sign that your soul is ready to breathe again. You have spent years bending, adapting, shrinking, carrying, pretending. And this softness, this tiny decision, is the moment where you finally turn toward yourself with a kind of compassion that feels both unfamiliar and deeply needed. Think back to the last time you felt a small pull inside you, the kind that urged you to rest or speak or cry or say no instead of yes. You may have ignored it out of habit, but that pull was not random. It was your inner life trying to rise through the cracks. Change rarely begins with firmness. It begins with tenderness, the tenderness of admitting you are tired, the tenderness of wanting something different, the tenderness of realizing you no longer want to abandon yourself for the sake of peace. Some people spend their entire lives waiting for permission to change, waiting for approval, waiting for the perfect moment, waiting for the world to understand their pain before they dare to honor it. But the truth is that the moment you decide to pay attention to your own heart, everything begins to shift, even if no one sees it, even if nothing external changes, even if you are still surrounded by the same responsibilities. The shift is internal, and internal shifts have a way of quietly rearranging the world. There is something powerful about choosing yourself in small ways, not in grand gestures, but in the moments where you choose honesty over silence, when you choose rest over guilt, when you choose to step back instead of pushing yourself beyond your limits, when you choose to feel instead of numbing. These moments accumulate. They build a new rhythm inside you. They teach you how to return to your own center after years of drifting away from it. Imagine how different your life might feel if you allowed yourself to honor that small pull each time it whispered. Imagine what would happen if you paused instead of forcing, listened instead of suppressing, breathed instead of bracing. Imagine how many years you have lived carrying more than anyone should carry. And imagine what it would mean to finally set down even a fraction of that weight. The truth is that change rarely begins with certainty. It begins with exhaustion, with longing, with the subtle realization that the person you have been is not the person you want to continue being. You may not know exactly what comes next. You may not feel ready. You may not feel brave. But the moment you decide you deserve a life where your heart is not constantly swallowed by silence, something inside you begins to soften. That softness is strength in its purest form. And in that softness, you discover that change does not require force. It requires willingness, a willingness to feel what you have avoided, a willingness to release the expectations that have shaped your life, a willingness to finally listen to the truth you carry inside your chest, the truth that has been waiting for you to pause long enough to hear it. If these words touched a place inside you that has been waiting quietly for attention, Share in the comments what small shift you feel rising within you, and subscribe if you want to keep exploring the quiet turning points that help the soul remember itself. There is a kind of ending that does not feel like an end at all, but more like a slow exhale after years of holding your breath. It is the moment when you finally stop wrestling with yourself, when the questions that once tormented you loosen their grip, when the ache in your chest softens into something almost gentle. This moment does not announce itself. It does not arrive with fireworks or revelations. It comes quietly, like dusk settling over a quiet street, like the final note of a song lingering in the air after the music has stopped. It comes when you realize that you no longer need to force anything, not answers, not certainty, not even hope. You sit with yourself differently now, not as someone who must be fixed or saved or explained, but as someone who has lived deeply, felt deeply, endured deeply. You begin to understand that surviving what you survived is not a small thing. It is a profound act of endurance, a kind of hidden courage you rarely recognized in yourself. You look back at the nights you thought would break you and see that they did not. You remember the mornings you rose even when rising felt impossible. You remember the love you gave, the truths you held silently, the tenderness you offered even when it was not returned. And slowly you begin to realize that there is a sacredness in all of it. There is a point where gratitude begins to replace the longing for answers. Gratitude for the strength that kept you standing even when you did not know where your feet were taking you. Gratitude for the quiet resilience that lived inside you long before you ever dared to acknowledge it. Gratitude for the moments of softness that revealed who you truly are, beneath the exhaustion and the worry and the striving. Gratitude even for the silence, because the silence taught you to listen to yourself in ways you would never have learned otherwise. As you rest here in this final space, you may feel something like a prayer rising inside you. Not a prayer that asks for anything, not a plea for change or healing or clarity. It is a prayer made of stillness, a prayer of presence, a prayer that breathes instead of speaks. It is the kind of prayer that exists simply because your heart is still beating, because your soul is still searching, because your life still has meaning even when it feels quiet. This is a prayer that requires nothing from the sky above. It is enough that it exists within you. There is peace in allowing the world to be what it is without demanding explanations. Peace in letting yourself be human without apology. Peace in understanding that not every wound must be healed before you are worthy of gentleness. You realize that living itself is a form of courage, that continuing to open your heart after everything is a testament to your spirit. You begin to sense that you are part of something larger, something that cannot be named but can be felt in the spaces between your breaths. And now, as this chapter settles softly into place, I want to thank you for reaching this moment with me. Thank you for allowing these words to meet you where you are. Thank you for carrying your story with such quiet dignity. Thank you for letting yourself feel what you felt while listening. The world needs hearts like yours, hearts that have known heaviness but still choose to listen, still choose to feel, still choose to walk forward with tenderness. Before you leave this space, take a moment to breathe gently and acknowledge yourself. You made it through every chapter of your own life. You stayed, you endured, you lived, and you are here now, reading these final lines with a depth that only someone who has truly lived can understand. If these words touched you, share in the comments what part of your journey you are ready to release or honor, and know that your voice is welcome here. And if you wish to continue walking through reflections that speak to your soul, you are invited to subscribe so that these moments of quiet truth can continue finding you. A new video is waiting for you on the screen, a continuation of this journey inward, a place where your heart will be met with the same tenderness and truth. When you are ready, click and step gently into the next chapter.